Bronte, and then today, someone from our youth, Russ, and like I explained or mentioned on Twitter, back in the day, like when I was 12, 13 years old, I think every kid of my generation, our generation, was into wrestling.
Yep.
And professional wrestling. And I think we have the same experience because you were probably watching it out of New York. I started getting into wrestling on Saturday afternoons. It was like Maple Leaf Wrestling on CHCH in Hamilton, or I think it was NWA Wrestling that was more in the Toronto, Buffalo area. But then I started watching WWF out of New York. It was on WOR. It was on at midnight. My parents thought I was insane, like a 12-year-old kid staying up to watch wrestling at midnight on a Saturday. But, it was, Vince McMahon was the announcer. He was the owner, but he was also the owner.
Well, he had just bought it from his dad. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the owner's son, but he was the announcer. And he wasn't playing the Mr. McMahon, big, powerful guy type of thing. And his color commentator was a guy named Bruno Sammartino, was – and it's funny because this was the era of what I called the ethnic wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
There was Cannonball, the Italians. There was Cannonball Tony Parisi. Yep. There was Ilio DiPaolo, who was from the Buffalo area.
Ivan Putski was Polish. Yeah,
Ivan Putski, Dominic DiNucci, and Bruno Sammartino. And I'm pretty sure he was a champion in the late '60s and early '70s. That was his.
Yeah, he had a huge run. Like his run went for a lot of years. I can't even tell you exactly how many years off the top of my head, but he had a huge run, and then superstar Billy Graham beat him.
Yes.
That ended the run, and then Bob Backlund had it for a million years because then they didn't really know what to do when Sammartino sort of hung it up, but he got him from point A. And that was the WWWF.
Yes.
They lost the lawsuit.
Yeah, it's gone through 3 name changes: WWWF, WWF, and now WWE.
Right. And but the biggest thing was, like, you and I used to watch it on the same station, but then living on Long Island, we were like the first neighborhood really on earth to get cable. Because Cablevision was out on Long Island, right? So it started, and one of the first things Cablevision started to do was televise those house shows from MSG and from Nassau Coliseum. And so nowadays those would be pay-per-views, right? But back then they weren't.
Yeah, so, they were like, for us, because we had our cable company was International Cable. We never knew where that channel was, where that broadcast was going to be. Sometimes they would pop it on USA Network, but sometimes
USA did it for a little bit too. Yeah,
but sometimes they'd pop it on like International Cable Channel 10, which was the one that they carry local softball tournaments on.
Even back then, we would get Nesson because like there just weren't that many stations,
right?
And they would have a lot of wrestling too, but a different league. But the point is, you would see some great matches, and I put one on my Facebook page that was the first ever steel cage match, and it was Bruno Sammartino, Ivan Koloff, and so that was a really good one. Like the thing about Sammartino was he was a guy that got bullied as a kid and built himself up, and was a really like stocky guy, and he was from Pittsburgh for real, so they used that, and he was an Italian guy, and a lot of people identified with that, and he was a hard worker and classy. Like he never, even though he would do some dirty things in the ring, outside of the ring with fans and everything else, he was always top notch.
Yes.
Never had a scandal, never had a steroid scandal.
No, and I don't think he ever went heel either. I don't think he ever went
heel.
Yeah.
Never turned heel. And
he was pretty consistent that way.
Very consistent, and so he really did help build that company. And it's a huge loss. He was like the first guy I really liked. Even my dad had watched him a little bit because he was around in the early '60s, and of course I was born in 63. So, but like by '67, he was already getting kind of big, and then by the time I was like 7, 8, 9, 10, he was huge, and so it was fun to watch those matches. Superstar Billy Graham's still around. He's actually on Facebook. I'm waiting to see what he'll say about it because he did beat him for the title, and he was a huge steroid guy, obviously.
I will pile drive him in heaven.
It was fun. It was good showmanship. They had great rants. Their rants were probably better than anybody can do now.
It's funny, Russ, because I don't know if how many people have seen it. A lot of people have the Andre the Giant documentary on HBO.
Yeah, it was good. It wasn't.
It wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but it was still pretty good. And the thing is that it brought me back to those early days of wrestling, because I remember Andre, being on those shows and how big he was, and big in terms of the start, not just big in terms of physical stature. And the fact that, it really made the WWF or WWE when he turned heel, and it was him versus Hogan. That was massive, massive, massive.
93,000 people at the Superdome. Oh, at the Kingdom, whatever the one. Well,
Silverdome. The Silverdome.
Silverdome. That was Silverdome.
Pontiac, Michigan, Silverdome.
But the last thing I would just say is this: when they used to do their promos, and they lived and died with those. There were three key elements. They would insult whoever the opposite fan base was. Right. They would always make sure they mentioned where they were going. So they would be like, Eklund, I'm going to hit your mother, and I'm going to hit her hard at 7 o'clock at the ACC Saturday night. And then you get back into don't worry, I'm going to win kind of thing. It was really, and it was seamless. Like it was brilliant advertising.
I'm going to drop a double knee on your leg at 9:30 on USA Network, mothers.
Sounds like you've been reading my emails again there, Russ. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But it's just, and that's sort of a lost art. They've tried to get back to that now, but that was the way they connected to the kids, though. Like,
yeah, but I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something, Russ. The political incorrectness that we saw in wrestling back then, if they were doing that now, it would be like scandalous. Like, just like the Polish Power Ivan Putski, and there was always dumb jokes about him.
But you know what? I'll say this about this. So I've never watched a wrestling match in my life. I have nothing to do with it. But I get it. I mean, I have friends who I've met some wrestlers because some of them are hockey fans, and
a lot of them are hockey fans.
Sweet guys. They're really sweet guys. It's always
Chris
funny.
Jericho.
Chris Jericho in Winnipeg. Actually, my neighbor across the street was the best man at his wedding.
Nice.
Wow. Jeez. So, but the one thing I'll say is, I mean, yeah, they were the politically incorrectness, like you're saying, Mike. But at the same time, that politically incorrectness exists in all forms of drama. Like if you were to go to television or like The Sopranos or anything. I mean, they are acting. This is right. To me, that's why I never had a problem with the political incorrectness in there, because it's
hilarious.
It exists on television. It exists in movies. It's not like it's a leader of the free world saying it. It's a person who's saying it, that's just, that's perfectly fine. And, it's acting, it's drama. So that's what it is, right?
Yeah,
so
Mike Doyle in the chat room said he used to deliver a newspaper to him. So there you go.
No way.
Said he was a really good guy. That was the thing. We all say he's a classy guy. As wrestling got bigger and things got more like salacious and everything, guys got less classy.
Yes, definitely. That when the Triple H Stephanie McMahon era sort of got in there. I mean, The Rock. I mean, Shawn Michaels. It got a little. It was still funny, but it got a little out there sometimes.
It did. But anyhow, we'll miss Bruno. It was just one of those things. It's just it is a bad week. I did, for people that know me, if they want to go to Sportsology, I did put up an interview with that I did with John Amarante in 2013, where he basically went through a lot of his career, and it's pretty interesting. So if people want to catch that, they could catch that too.
Kevin, we're live, and it's ironic. As soon as Eck went in the comments said Kevin ? You popped up. It was like,
always the case.
Well, what's so funny and what's so embarrassing is I looked down when you sent me the invite, and you guys are almost always a couple of minutes late. And I almost always count on you guys being. Today I looked down and I was running late myself, and you sent the invite at 2:59. You were actually on time and early, and I can't get my act together.
That's because somebody who has a sense of time was doing the inviting.
And I do. I build in the fact that you guys are late into my.
I'm kidding, Eck. I'm just kidding.
So.
I know.
So I apologize.
No worries at all. No worries at all.
Anything to add, Peter and Kevin? You could get in if you have anything to add about Bruno Sammartino. Feel free.
About Bruno Sammartino passing away, the wrestler. I don't know if you were into professional wrestling.
I was, but I don't have a lot to say about him. I mean, I did when I was a kid. It was a big thing, obviously, and it was so funny, like. Back then, when you had little information, like there were actually schoolyard debates about whether or not it was real.
I remember. Yeah, I remember. In my Methodist home, we weren't allowed to watch Three's Company or wrestling, so those were the things.
My 80-some-year-old grandmother in the 60s was a big time wrestling.
I really wanted to see whether Jimmy Superfly Snuka could beat Mr. Roper.
Yeah, I know. That was my mom. She's probably watching too. They thought Three's Company was and Saturday Night Live. Actually, I wasn't allowed to watch that either. Come to think of it. But there you go. That's okay.
You weren't allowed to laugh.
You know what? Larry was a bad influence. I gotta say that guy was trouble.
Yeah, he was. Larry was the underrated character on Three's Company.
Not too many people prefer Joyce DeWitt to Suzanne Summers.
I did. See, I was always that's my issue. Like I liked
And you liked Marianne, I'm sure, over Ginger.
I liked Marianne. I liked
no.
I did like
Bailey Quarters over Lonnie Anderson on WKRP.
Yeah,
Bailey, absolutely. No, definitely. All right, let's move on.
I have no problem with that.
This really is not that good radio.
Well, we're not on radio, but that's okay.
Sure, or whatever you would call it. Good over the air speaking-ish things.
Peter, you follow me.
All right. Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, April 18th, 2018. It's Wednesday, by the way. Just so you're checking. It's Wednesday, April 18th, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Tessier.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports, and I thought it was Thursday. So,
Kevin, that's why I love you. You and I.
I finally figured it out before, but I went for a good hour thinking it was Thursday.
I've done that so much. It's the staying up super late that's just destroying me. Like absolutely. And you guys know I'm never good with dates in general, but right now just staying up this late. Like even last night, having to watch the end of that game. I fell asleep in the beginning of. I fell asleep watching the end of the Columbus-Washington game, but then woke up like wide awake in the middle of the Vegas game and just had to watch and then could have watched another game. I was so awake, that kind of thing. So
Kevin, let me ask this. I believe this is a conspiracy to make media members, hockey reporters look stupid, because I think 80% of the people out there, Eck not being one of them, picked LA to win this series.
And Kevin not being one of them.
And I mean, it wasn't even, all the games were close, but it was a sweep. I mean, I don't get, it just keeps going with the Vegas Golden Knights.
Well, it's incredible. And, because we can all monitor our numbers and what people are reading, like we know at USA Today that people can't get enough of the Vegas Golden Knights. Like, wow. I haven't been out there for that series. I've been elsewhere, but I have been writing.
You're going there soon.
I've been writing stuff off of that series. Today, I just wrote a story about how all the action, all the betting, like nobody really bets on NHL. It's just not a big betting. But I talked to one of the bookmakers out there who said there's been heavy betting on the Vegas Golden Knights, and which makes it really fascinating for all the Vegas bookmakers, because all of them live in the city and they love their Golden Knights. And so it's not good for their business if the Knights hit, because they were big odds.
It is astonishing how this has taken off. Like it's astonishing that you'd say all the bookmakers love the Vegas. I mean, would we have ever said that? Like you knew a team would do pretty well. I mean, it's a big marketplace, it's all that stuff. But oh my gosh, I mean, just
No, it's hit bigger than anybody thought.
This is such an interesting point about the bookmakers, Kevin, because I remember, 20 years or so ago when I was living in Vancouver, we'd go down to Vegas a fair bit. It was an easy flight and everything. And one of the things I always used to do was I used to go hit a sports book and place bets on hockey, because we found that one thing for sure was the bookies weren't taking into account goalie starts and who had started when and who was what the backup was in the matchup, and they just weren't looking at it in the same detail. And the one thing we know about bookies is they monitor the bets and how the bets are made, and they learn from it so they can better make the odds in their favor. Like that's how they work. And there's a big thing in basketball about that, how a guy figured out that Vegas bookies weren't watching the point spread, weren't watching the over-under in the first half of games, and a guy made a ton of money on that. Well, they're going to learn more about hockey as they have more bets played, because the way people look at it is whether the bettors are actually going to be as smart as some think they are. But I think that's totally fascinating, because it was easy money 20 years ago. You could put $50 down on a game and you almost certainly we're going to win.
Let me just say this. Back in my youngin' days when I was betting, it used to be hockey was it used to be minus a goal and a half, minus 2 goals, and then at some point it switched to the way baseball is bet, like minus 120, like for a certain pitcher matchup. So they got away from goals, and I remember, listening to a Chicago Blackhawk game back in the 90s that they got the goal that made the difference with 1 second remaining in an empty net. It was totally unpredictable. Now I think there's a little more able to determine what's going on. But I have a feeling, Kevin, that the betting for Vegas is sort of like, oh, it's our team. It's it's sort of like the Vegas home thing. Mm-hmm. I want to support my team, so I'll throw a $25 bet on the Golden Knights. That type of thing.
Yeah, it's not even a theory. That's actually what's happening. Yeah. You just, people are there. They want to support their team. They're in the city. Mm-hmm. Hey, let's put some money on the Golden Knights. And the guy that I interviewed from Westgate Sportsbook, he was quite funny about it. He's a season ticket holder, and he said, I'm rooting for the Golden Knights, even though it's it's bad for business. But he said, we've always long been in this position. He said, I'm a Broncos fan, and he said, so we tend to say, well, we'll worry about tomorrow.
Right. Let's just ask one question about the other side of this series, because I don't think like Rob Blake or Luke Robitaille or John Stevens are in trouble, but the Kings, I mean, they're they didn't have a great year last year. They didn't make the playoffs. Kopitar had a really good year this year, but there's something missing there, and now they've bowed out in the first round and got swept by an expansion team. I mean, what do you think that this team is going to do in the summer?
Oh, I don't think there's going to be too much hand-wringing. I mean, when you look at this, don't you just look at Marc-Andre Fleury as the primary reason?
He had a 977 save percentage.
I mean, this team under Stevens has, to me, has sort of turned the corner in terms of what they need to do to sort of get back and contend again. They're playing a different style. They can score more goals. Anze Kopitar had an incredible season. Dustin Brown. Like if Carter wouldn't have been hurt this year,
right,
that team would have even been, stronger.
They could use one more scorer, Kev. I think that, like any team could use that. And I think what they did a little too late in yesterday's game, John Stevens sort of didn't give up the no mistake hockey early enough, I felt, because he finally did give that up at some point in the third period. But I felt like by the way Fleury was playing, he needed to take more chances earlier, and they didn't. And so I think he'll learn from that too, because it's great to play that type of hockey, except when the other team's playing it and outplaying you in that, then you've got to come up with something else.
Yeah. I think it came down to depth. I mean, I thought after the first line, LA had nothing. I mean, honestly,
I wouldn't say nothing.
I mean, no, really, when you look at the chances, I mean, look at even. I mean, they had shots, but look at when you go through Marc-Andre Fleury's great saves of the series, they were against one line.
Yeah.
They really were. And it's just like the other lines were getting chances, but not like, not the great chances that you were seeing from the one line. And they really were built around one line this year.
I saw Pearson getting good chances. Toffoli had some, but I think like the days of Trevor Lewis being an effective player for them are probably gone, because he was never that fast to begin with. And
Kyle Clifford, guys. Yeah. Kyle Clifford, guys like that. Yeah, they
got inside Doughty's head. I really do. I think they really messed up Doughty. Beyond just.
Doughty had a good game. I saw him do a lot of good things in that game.
He did good things, but when you would hear him talk, and he's always kind of like, he's always ornery, and he always says what's on his mind. But when you would hear him talk, remember, this guy is a leader on that team. Like, he is one of the guys that everyone's listening to. He was very erratic and very angry all the time. Like just complete anger about everything. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
There's got to be a high level of disappointment. I mean, come on. And the mindset of anybody playing against Vegas this year, even after they win the division, is, they're an expansion team. We're going to beat them, especially for a guy who's won 2 Stanley Cups and who's arguably one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He thinks that they're going to go in and just like most of us did, and say, okay, we're going to win this series, and then to be down 3-0 to them and leading once in the entire series. I think
famously a guy who said in the beginning of the year, remember when they were beaten twice, he said that there's no way that team will be better than us at the end of the year.
Right.
So publicly. So he's like, he's eating those words, and it felt like those words were grating on him. Like he felt like he knew that he was eating those words. That's what it felt like to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, Kev. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he was certainly angry about the suspension. They made that clear. I guess I would agree that he seemed a little too emotional for me. Most guys in that position have learned to just kind of move on. You got to let it go and, kind of play. And I thought in his game when he came back, I thought he played recklessly. He was a little, too much, trying to do too much. But I don't think, this Vegas team is so special that I think they shouldn't overreact, they being the Kings, to what happened there. I mean, they're obviously Blake has done a good job. They've sort of recalibrated their team a little bit, and I think their approach is kind of what you want to do. They've opened up the offense a little bit, I said coming into that season that I felt Kopitar had to be much better, and he really was. Like he really took it to heart. Like he had a disastrous year. The year before, and
I mean, look, the goal differential was close in that series every game. So
that's the thing, right.
Though, like, I don't know if you guys have brought this up. I had to run away there for a second, but when has a losing goalie in a series posted a .944 save percentage and been swept, and the winning goalie basically plays perfect and plays a .977?
Yeah, I think Ron Hextall in '87 Stanley Cup.
That's about it. No, you're absolutely right, and it was insane. I mean, but it makes you also think about the season that the Kings would have had if Kopitar and Brown didn't have unbelievable years. Like
if Carter didn't get hurt.
Carter didn't get hurt, and Carter in the playoffs too. I mean, you got to point the finger at him too. He really didn't show up for these 4 games. I felt like maybe he's just not.
Yeah, that comes down to, and I say this all the time. When you come back. From an injury is not when you come back.
Right. I think that was the case. That was definitely the case here for sure.
Yeah,
and this was Jeff Carter. We saw Jeff Carter get hurt in Philly a lot, and this was his MO. There are some players that come back and they get that brief adrenaline, and they're really good for a couple games when they get back, and then they fall off the table.
Sure.
He was not a brief adrenaline guy. Like he was a slow build back, and then a couple weeks in, you would get Jeff Carter back really. And I don't think we got to that. I don't think he got
frustrated in that series. I felt like.
Oh yeah.
I think it was about 6 minutes left in that game. I almost felt like he was beaten. Like you could see it on him. He was out of breath, gasping.
Because every time you turned around in that game, boom, there was a Vegas Golden Knight.
It's incredible. And
there was no room on the ice. None.
It is the craziest thing. And now, so most people, and I didn't, I picked them in 7. I picked the Knights. No one picked the 4-game sweep. That's just crazy. And it is interesting though. Someone did point out to me today that the Blackhawks and Kings, the two masterful teams of the last decade, both kind of end their legacies on 4 games first round eliminations, which is interesting, to a degree. I mean, not saying that's ending. Both those teams are still good teams, but they both kind of fall hard. But the one thing I want to say before that is now when you look to the next round, how many people are going to pick the Vegas team? Like I think it's going to be insane to see how many people pick Vegas against.
Not necessarily, and if you want to include another team that, unless things change a different way tonight, that's going to get swept, is Anaheim, with San Jose being up 3-0, which is again something I didn't think was going to happen with the Sharks without Joe Thornton. I mean, is everybody going to jump on the Sharks bandwagon because they're playing Vegas? Maybe people are now convinced that Vegas is for real.
People never jump on the Sharks bandwagon. If there's one thing I've learned, that never happens.
Well, no. I doubled down at.
That's actually not true. I was going to say everybody was on the Sharks bandwagon, and then they gave up. Remember, they were a good team. Like
everybody. Yeah, right. No, you're exactly right.
Everybody picked the Sharks all the time.
right.
All the time.
Like a bad penny, Kemp. I went back. I was asked on a show recently, who is my dark horse in the West? And I said, well, preseason I picked Anaheim to win, so I'm going to say I'm going to have them coming out of the West. But my dark horse would be San Jose.
Yes. So, Kevin, can you see Can you see the black cloud floating over my head? Because I'm the one who took Thornton and Marlowe and a couple other Sharks when they were up 3-0 on the Kings, and the Kings came back and won 4 straight. So that was me. That was it.
Well, because the one thing I felt, and I've said it, Kevin, you probably would agree, of all the goalies in the playoffs right now, Martin Jones is probably the most underrated.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What I was going to tell
Absolutely.
you is that, when you're on as many radio shows as I am, everyone always asks who your sleeper is. So if you do enough radio shows, you can name a different sweeper every show.
I never tried doing that. I always felt like that's a great strategy, though.
Spread it around. Spread the sleepers
So
around.
I think my prediction is that people are going to heavily, all the pundits of the world are going to heavily go for Vegas in the next round. I think it'll be.
They play, it does.
But this round, they heavily went against them. So
because I think of Jonathan Quick, and Jonathan Quick was pretty great.
Was it the Kings, or was it the fact that, like we all said, like Vegas can't possibly?
No, it was the Kings.
I think part of it was Vegas can't play at this level anymore. It wasn't just the Kings.
No, it was part of that too.
Just think of this: we are one round closer to the hockey media's dream series of Vegas versus Nashville. Check your livers and your stomachs at the door.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if you really think about it, how many goals did Vegas score in this series?
No, I know, and not even.
That's why I don't think everybody's going to jump on the wagon.
But then when you really think about it, they went against probably the second best goalie in the playoffs. Like they went against. I mean, Quick was unbelievable.
Goalie was better.
I mean, that was a goaltending, series to be sure.
Oh, we haven't seen one.
I've got a subject that I think everybody will want to talk about and have fun with.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I'm actually going to write a column on this too. But have we reached the point? And I thought about this last night when I was watching that overtime. That Alex Ovechkin is now a sympathetic character.
No, I'm so glad you brought this up. This was my topic for today too. I swear I have my notes right here.
True. I sat and watched that game, and I found myself thinking, geez, it would be nice if Ovechkin scored. And I said, did I just think that? Like,
I was gonna go the opposite way on it but you're right. But you're right. I feel that way too, and not just but the Olympics too. Like all the things that have happened to him, it just always seems to not work out for him, right?
What's happened to him? No, I
can't win the big games. I mean,
here's the reason I think that, and I've talked about this before. But we're a team that always talks about the team concept, but we always have to blame one person. It's the most crazy thing I've ever seen in my life. Everybody talks all the time. NHL is such a team sport. There's no other sport that's a team sport like hockey. But as soon as the series is over, we got one guy. We got to blame.
I think there's a better chance that Brad Marchand will be a sympathetic figure than Alex Ovechkin.
Now I'm going to blame. Now I'm going to make my case. If you've been watching this series, if you're talking about guys who are working hard, like. I mean, Ovechkin has just worked so hard in this series.
I totally agree. And I think he's up as a leader. You know what it is, Kev? I never bashed him or blamed him ever. I always said, there were some playoffs where he definitely didn't give you everything he got. He's giving you everything he got, but I got to be honest. I don't feel sympathetic towards him. I actually think Christian Juice had more impact in that game than Alex Ovechkin because he helped plug up their defensive problem.
If the Caps lose this series, Peter, I think Ovechkin is not the one to blame. Right now, I think it's all right. I think it's Brian McClellan who's to blame because their depth is completely gone away from the team last year. But yesterday the line with Devontae Smith-Pelly, that depth line got them the winning goal, but. I think if they fall short, if they lose to Columbus, it's because they loaded up last year and then they had to completely pare down, and they're not as deep and not as talented as they were last year.
And Nate Schmidt takes out Kopitar in that series. Like that's the other thing that kept coming up to my head. Like the Capital again. Nate Schmidt. He was the guy on Kopitar every time he got the puck. But one thing I want to say,
he had a good game. I mean, but
one thing I want to say about
too. I mean,
I'm going to blame Alex Ovechkin, and this is. And I never blame people, but my whole thing today was about blaming him. So I'm going to do this for a second. I went back and did some math quickly. It might be wrong, but I came up with 13 of the last 23 Capitals playoff games have gone to overtime, which is an unbelievable number when you think about it. Like they have played against Pittsburgh 2 years ago. 3 of them went to overtime. They lost all 3. Against the Maple Leafs last year, 5 of 6 went to overtime. Last year against Pittsburgh, only 1 went to overtime, but they lost it. And then in this series, all 3 have gone to overtime. So that's an incredible, staggering number of like 13. I think it's 13 of the last 23. And Ovechkin has not a single goal in those overtimes. And so to me, when you look at what's going on, I mean that to me is a crazy thing. I mean that is just because here's a guy who scores a half a goal a game in his career, right? So I mean, over half a goal a game.
But we admit that the playoffs are a different kettle of fish. It's a different animal.
But in overtimes, how many times your best players got to be your best players? I mean, how many times do we see that?
Did you blame Mike Gardner?
Go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say, like, here's one thing when you think about that stat, and it's super interesting. That's a whole lot of playing on borrowed time and playing on adrenaline, right?
Yeah.
You're playing on a different level. So, I mean, now, if you want to do even more math, I'm not asking you to do it right now. How much extra time have the Caps played compared to everyone else? Because it wears on
double overtime games too, all over the place.
Like overtime is just as much psychological warfare for those guys, trying to find the time when you've got a chance to rush, there's nothing in your legs, that just all these different things that you have to sort of go through mentally, and that takes a toll. So when it comes around again, you've got before last night, you've got 12 other overtimes that Alex Ovechkin knows about and has weighing on his mind,
and hasn't
done anything.
And he hasn't scored, and that's crazy. I mean, there are players, like guys out there who have scored in overtimes, that you wouldn't believe. But he is not. He's the leading scorer, the best goal scorer in this era of hockey. Okay, and his team has been the most disappointing in this era of hockey in the playoffs, and he has not scored in overtime. I don't think you can ignore that.
I mean, I'm sure he's been on the ice, and I'm sure he's set up. I don't recall when was the last time Sidney Crosby scored an overtime winner in a playoff game
against the Capitals, by the way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm saying I'm not.
When's the last time Claude Giroux had a playoff goal? Well,
all that's true. But we're talking about the number one scorer of this generation.
I'm just saying it happens to a lot of players.
But Crosby doesn't have 6 overtime. Go ahead,
Kevin.
I'm looking that up right now. That's because I was going to say too. I don't know if you can. I think it is noteworthy that he hasn't scored, but in the overtime, because it's a big deal. But no one on the Capitals has more than one of those, except for Nicholas Backstrom.
Right.
And historically in the NHL, as we all know, because we all cover these games, it's the non-stars that end up scoring a good chunk of these goals.
That is true. Yeah. But we're looking at a guy who, under pressure, has tended, like in Olympics pressure, has faded. And now you're talking about
Lars Eller's first goal, and he didn't even touch it.
In the Toronto series last year, it was Tom Wilson, it was Marcus Johansson, who's no longer with the Capitals, and I think the other one was Kuznetsov. I'm fairly sure it was.
Right, but wouldn't you expect the best scorer of this generation to have scored once? I mean, because a goal in overtime is the difference between a win or a loss. You're talking in a 7-game series, that is an enormous thing. So when your team has failed to progress in the playoffs, and your leading scorer has not gotten one overtime goal, and you've been to so many overtimes, I think that's impossible to ignore.
Okay.
I mean, it's the biggest disappointment.
Hold on. Ovechkin, there's a video here. Ovechkin, you're talking about playoffs only?
Playoff overtimes, yes. Yeah. Only in the playoffs.
Okay.
They brought it up. I didn't know. I assumed he had scored, and they brought this up last night when I was watching the game.
Regular season.
They brought it up last night. I assumed he had scored in the playoffs. I assumed he had it over. In his whole career, he doesn't have one.
Okay.
Not just like the last couple years. I mean, we're not just the last 13 overtimes over 2 years. It's just, I don't know. I mean, but yet I do still feel bad for him. Like, I agree with you, Kevin. I still look at him and I still feel bad for a guy because he's a good guy, and I feel like he deserves a chance to go to win a Stanley Cup, and it's just never going to happen, right?
I found a list of other guys who haven't scored in overtime like that. Rick Nash, Ryan Getzlaf, Patrick Elias. So there's, the Hockey News did an article, and there is a list.
None of them are the best scorer of their generation.
No, but I mean,
playing on the number one.
Rick Nash doesn't surprise me.
Go ahead, Kev. Sorry, I interrupted you, Kev.
No. But that, I agree. I mean,
Mark Messier never got a single overtime playoff goal in his career. Mark Messier.
All right, that's pretty surprising.
Wow.
So there you go.
But his team's won Stanley Cups. All right, so the Capitals have been a disappointment.
Yeah, the 5 cup rings on his fist.
Is going to work at it until we figure out a way to win.
This is like a circular firing squad now.
This is the team that has been the biggest playoff disappointment over the last several years, right?
Right.
But the Capitals, they've never been to the conference finals since then.
They've found different reasons and different ways to lose.
Right.
Nobody would be more eager to blame Alex Ovechkin for the ills of the Washington Capitals than I do. I don't like him as a player. He's an extreme talent. He's a phenomenal talent. He's a Hall of Famer.
Gordie Howe, Mario Lemieux, Marcel Dion.
Yeah, I mean, but
list actually.
Stanley Cup. Well, not Marcel.
He's not scored overtime winners.
Yeah, okay.
Right, but
Ray Bork.
Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like I don't like if you don't win a cup, you're not, that you're unfulfilled or that you're lacking.
Right.
Because it's going to become, as we move along, especially now. I mean, John Tavares has not won a Stanley Cup. Steven Stamkos has not won a Stanley Cup. Are they, not great players? I mean,
Steve Yzerman was.
These are teams that have been the best teams in the regular season that aren't we're talking about epic fails in the playoffs by these teams.
Steve Yzerman was a loser and was going to get traded to Ottawa in the early 90s when Detroit kept losing, and then finally it was like John Elway with Denver in the NFL. Finally, later on in his career, he wins the Stanley Cup. So it's
Mike Gardner never won a Stanley Cup.
Right.
Plenty of guys.
Yeah, Ed Belfour, I remember was always said to be a terrible playoff guy and everything else until he won.
No, I mean, I know, I'm not like, I think there's great players that'll never win. Like Joe Thornton will probably never win a Stanley Cup, but there's certain players.
How dare you put me in the position of defending Alex Ovechkin?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, what about the flip side of that? Are you saying that if Ovechkin had been on the Penguins last year, that they wouldn't have won?
No, I'm not saying that, but he wasn't. So it's, to me, I mean, the fact is, the Penguins are the Penguins a better team than the Capitals? I mean, we don't know. I mean, they're better in the playoffs. They're better head to head.
I say they're much better than that.
Okay, they're and they've been better head to head. So I guess you say yes, they're better.
Last year on paper would have been one of the few times I would have said that the Capitals were better player by player. But the Penguins, I think, have that unconscious. They're in the Capitals' head, and they have Crosby and Malkin. I mean, last year their
Crosby
defense was not good.
Every stressful, every intense situation, Crosby rises to the top all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, again, it's just I named you that list. That list is a Hall of Fame list of guys who haven't scored overtime winners in the playoff. I mean,
well, I don't remember Gordie Howe's teams. I mean, but you would know this, Kevin. Were his teams supposed to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs and didn't?
Well, yeah, he played for really good teams. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
That failed and didn't win the playoffs.
They won.
He won too, right? I mean, they did win. I mean, he did. Yeah. I mean, eventually they won.
I mean, they were in the Stanley Cup final 4 times in the 60s. They just lost to the Leafs and the Canadiens. It doesn't mean that they suck.
And it's easier then. There's 6 teams, and that's different.
Well, I think it is fair to be critical of Ovechkin. Like I think let's look at his numbers in the playoffs. I think, he's had some playoffs when he hasn't, kind of stepped up, but he also has had some playoffs when he's played very well and they didn't win. So
that's true. He has, and it's not all on him. I'm just saying that.
I just don't like it when people just say, well, Ovechkin can't win. Well, he could under the right circumstances.
Yes, no, I think he could win too, and I agree with you on that. There's been a lot of other issues in Capitals. The Capitals have had all kinds of issues. So I'm not pinning this on Ovechkin. I'm just saying that when you don't score in overtime, that is the difference between a win or a loss in a playoff series, which to me is enormous.
Kevin, let me ask you about this, because we've had a couple suspensions which have surprised me in the playoffs, and usually you had to take somebody's head off to get a suspension, but we've had Doughty with a game for the hit on Carrier. We had the Kadri 3 game, which I know a lot of people in Toronto were pissed off about because they thought he was going to get suspended, but they didn't think he was going to get 3. And now in the game last night between Winnipeg and Minnesota, and Winnipeg is now up 3-1 in the series, Josh Morrissey cross-checks Eric Stahl on the side of the head. He doesn't get a penalty call, but now it's being reviewed by the Department of Player Safety. What do you think of the suspensions, and what do you think he's going to get?
Well, I think the first 2 were very deserving of the suspensions, and the third, I think Morrissey will be suspended as well. Doughty was a 0 or a 1. Like, it could have go either way. Like that could have been a fine. Like I didn't think. But I thought that by the letter of the law, he was guilty. Like they've talked about this so often about that it's not what you hit first. Like and people have pointed that out, but fans just really don't get it. Like they all say, he struck the arm first. That really has nothing to do with it.
No, it really doesn't.
It's the principal point of contact.
Right.
And that clearly was the head. Now, it was, I think, Eddie Olczyk called it a hockey play gone bad, and I think that's exactly what it was. Like he had no intent of doing that, but just sometimes you got to be responsible for how you're playing the game. He turned into it, and he came up high. He didn't have to come out high. He had ample time to make a decision on how to do it. He could have not hit him at all, but he chose to kind of go up high. I wouldn't have been upset if they would have called it a fine, but I also think, I thought Peros was trying to send a message that, hey, look, we'll take Stars out, because what do we always say? They don't take the Stars.
It was a power play situation, so they nullified Stahl for the power play. Then he ends up scoring, getting in on the scoring after that. And that's why Boudreau complained so much. And, he did have a point. Like, those were very pivotal moments in that game.
Well, I mean, Peter,
okay.
let me ask you. Go ahead.
There's two issues here. If it's contact to the head, Russ, I gave you 2 videos from the game last night on Twitter of direct contact to the head where Sherratt, after the whistle, got headbutted. Suspend him then. No. Contact to the head. That's the point. Kevin just said it. Direct contact to the head. Then there was one where Foligno came in and basically tried to decapitate Trouba. And no call. So no call on either of those. Hang on. You got to listen to the whole argument, though. You got to listen to the whole argument. If we're going to stand by direct contact to the head, then you review everything. You don't pick and choose because Bruce Boudreau whined like a red tomato, embarrassed that his team couldn't do anything at 5-on-5, that cost him the game.
Well,
if like Bruce Boudreau thinks
one episode of the Brady Bunch where Peter tried to do everything by the letter of the law, and it doesn't work out.
But then
way.
You can't cite the letter of the law, and then say it's got to be like this because this is what happened, and then only apply it in one case. You apply it in all the times.
When a guy's on the power play and you hit him in the head, and you bloody him.
Hit to the head is a hit to the head.
No. He did it stick right to the head. He bloodied him. That is way different.
No, there was no blood.
That is not even a hockey play.
There's no blood.
That is not even a hockey play, Peter. That is a sign of aggression, and that's all it was.
Yeah, no one's denying that he did it. My point.
Impact on the game.
Kevin, you have to unmute yourself, Kevin.
My point, though, is if the first point is Kevin's, a hit to the head, contact to the head is what they're looking at, you have to deal with everything. You can't pick and choose. Should Morrissey be? Yeah, I get it. He should. But then you take everything else with it.
No, but the bigger point is what Ed was really driving at is they should have taken care of that in game.
Oh, of course.
By not taking care of that.
Here's the thing. If that had been a 2-man advantage, does Bruce Boudreau want suspension after that?
He still does, but it affected the game. Yeah.
Well, he said after the game that they lost because they didn't get
the direct quote was that cost us the game.
Yeah. So now
come on, Bruce.
Now, Kevin,
but there was a point against, and it could have been a point for on the power play. I think it's a leap too.
Could have been nothing.
Now,
look, I'm not saying Morrissey shouldn't be there, but if everyone's going to line up behind the contact to the head, you can't pick and choose. If you're standing by the rule,
I think it's kind of odd that it was their best player that he was targeting. Like it wasn't like
look at the replay again. Look where Morrissey's looking. So Stahl comes up.
Let me
push Stahl off. Stahl brings his stick up. So then his arms move and he turns.
No.
And he turns.
No.
Let me just ask this final question.
Watch the replay.
I've been watching.
Morrissey's head was looking at the puck. He totally screwed up. No one was debating that. Was he targeting the head?
Peter,
no, but he hit the head.
All right, but let's before this is a tough one to get into, obviously, because I mean we all kind of disagree. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this hit?
On the Morrissey hit?
Yeah.
I think he should be suspended. I thought he was when I saw it, I thought he was going to be suspended. So
yeah.
Now, Kevin?
But now the other one has to be brought up is the Subban hit on McKinnon because it's also, and that one is really going under the radar. I don't know why. It's really, but because Subban comes out and says in the Tennessee, and I think I saw it in the USA Today, right? Because Tennessee and the USA Today guys are connected together,
right?
That Subban said he would do it again, and this was a punch to the head. I mean, people haven't seen
one
this.
One guy does intent to injure and admits it. No suspension. Another guy who's never done a thing in his 2-year NHL career is now he's evil incarnate. Like,
Right.
again, you got to find out like where's your happy medium here and how you look at these things. And that's the problem. And again, and I'll go back to what we said 2 days ago. If you're expecting consistency in the NHL playoffs, you haven't been watching the first 82 games.
And don't get me wrong, Kevin. I thought the Kadri hit on Wingles was reprehensible. It was stupid. It was clearly a response to Chara and Wingles sandwiching Mitch Marner in the corner. But when you give Doughty a game and you're comparing the things that people are suspended for, I in no way thought Kadri was going to get suspended for 3. And I think that suspension, and we'll see Thursday night whether Boston or Toronto wins, but that was a potential to basically end that series based on a suspension, because Kadri is an important cog in the Leafs playoff chances.
Well, I think he paid a severe price for this reason. I think it brought home exactly the type of play that they want out. Defenseless player.
Yes.
That's talked about a lot. Whenever there's a defenseless player, you couldn't be more defenseless than he was at that point.
Right.
Going down, face against the boards. And the way he finished the check, skates in the air, leaving his feet. And I think he paid an extra game for the fact that it was such a, you called it stupid, irresponsible act. It
truly was.
Clearly was trying to hurt him. Like,
Kevin, I think he paid the extra game because in the post game he said, "I saw Mitch get hurt," and then did what he did. So he basically admitted this was a retaliatory hit on Wingles for what him and Chara did to Marner.
But anybody who watched it knew that's exactly what it was, because it's one of those things you can see.
Right, but you don't admit it.
Yeah.
Hang on. So let's ask this. Is the NHL Department of Player Safety taking in post-game comments in their factors of how they?
Of course, yeah. Why wouldn't you?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you should know. You have to, because it's into. I mean, players are in, but they don't. They didn't with Subban, which is what I want to. I mean, and I'm. That's what I don't understand.
That's where I was going with this.
Peter, it's an admission of guilt.
I don't understand with Subban, who punched McKinnon in the back of the head.
Yeah.
What they were thinking, like why that became nothing.
What I would say about all this too is, and this is the frustration for me, I think it's fair to criticize the inconsistency. It's really hard to understand it because it's so up and down. But saying all that, I mean, we've all covered the league for a very long time. There's a lot of years we have between us here. And we all know that it's impossible. Like, we are never going to get anything close to resembling consistency and supplemental discipline, because every act is so subjective. And we see it with the NFL. On the catch rule, like, we all sit and watch those games, and you're sitting with 3 buddies, and there's 4 of you, and it's always a 2-2 split on what you think you just saw.
But Kev, we had video, and the problem is, and I think this is why I think Boudreau and Stahl were so mad. It was so blatant, and nobody saw that. Really?
You say that, Ross, but I think that's in itself a ridiculous statement because of this reason. It's amazing to me that I will talk to GMs who have been forever watching the game. We all see the same video. These are guys who live in the league, and they can never agree. Yeah. So you can't say things are blatant.
But Toronto saw it. That's my point.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. So you say it's blatant, but someone else thinks has Siebes
It was a blatant hit to the head. Was he trying to crack him in the head? I don't think so.
No, that's fine. I agree, but
Russ,
I think that's what's getting lost.
And they could have let the referees know, hey, you missed one, guys. Put him in the box.
So there's a sport that does that. Actually, international rugby does that. They have an official in the box, and they actually have a 2-way radio. It's fascinating to watch, because the broadcast, you know what they do? They actually broadcast the conversation between the two.
Russ, and I know
amazing transparency thing to listen to, and how they arrive at the determination, and it's cleaned the game up huge.
I know you had to get going, Russ, but I wanted to ask about Game 4, Penguins and Flyers. I saw the video after our show yesterday of Couturier and Gudas, and he may play tonight. This may be all some chicanery. He didn't.
Well, there's no chicanery in the morning skate. He may play.
But honestly, if he's 50%, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, you know what the thing is? What became really clear, and 6ABC had the best shot of it because They were there because they literally are just trying to shoot practice, so they have some footage to show on the nightly broadcast, and they got to play, right? And they were doing 2 different drills. That's the thing that's crazy.
That was the problem. They
were doing 2 different drills at the same time, and Gudas clearly didn't notice where his teammate was, and then he clips him. And, you know, that's pretty stupid. I mean, there's just no way around it. Now, I was asked on the radio today, did I think there'd be ramifications on the team? And I said, no, not on the team. But I said, is management happy? I can't answer that question. Management may be mad about this.
At who, though? At Hackstall or at Gudas?
No,
I mean, I don't think
at Gudas, for, you know, not being aware of his surroundings even in practice, because this could literally kill their series. Like, if Couturier doesn't play and Nolan Patrick's playing first line center, you know, it doesn't look good for the Flyers. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't look good either way. I mean,
and
I mean,
really
the fact is, I mean, you've got a goalie. You know, I mean, and Elliott's he did a fine job in game 2. You were at the first 2 games of the series, right, Kev?
Yes.
So. Yeah,
I'll mute.
But yeah, to me, I mean, you know, the problem that you have here is you have a goalie in Elliott who's not quick enough side to side to play against the quickest side to side team in the league, and that's a bigger issue than Couturier. Although, you know, talking to people around today, I did get the impression that Couturier was going to give it a go, and then some people, and I actually got somebody on the team who was actually upset about the fact he was going to give it a go, saying he shouldn't try to. It's not worth it. This like it, and this none of this is of course on the record as to who this was, But then again, the whole feeling is Couturier is about as old school hockey player as you can find.
Right.
And if there's a guy
too, like this is the end of the season for him either way, right? So
he doesn't care what this means to next year and the year after that. Couturier right now is very much in the moment of this game. Now, there's a couple other things that I think that, you know, I don't know if we're going to see it or not, but that could help the series a little bit more. I'm actually going tonight with my daughter. I haven't been to a game in a long time, but I'm actually because my son's been out, but it's going to be kind of fun. I'm actually going to be sitting in the stands. So it'll be kind of fun to watch.
Nice.
Yeah. So something to look for tonight is the belief that, you know, Robert Hagg, I don't know if he's going to play tonight or not, or if he's going to be brought back in at any point here in the series.
Doesn't seem like it.
But there are definitely some people, at least some people
Jordan Wheel will be on the 3rd line.
Right. Jordan Wheel helps because of the speed, like we've all said.
But will be out unless Couturier's out, and the other changes, Konecny's on the 2nd line, which will help too. Which will help too. So they'll have a little more speed. Laterra stays in there though. That's the amazing thing.
That's crazy.
But he has. Here's the funny thing: they have had trouble covering Laterra at moments in this series, but the problem is, after those moments are gone and Hackstall cuts the 4th line, then you got a guy that's literally only played 6 minutes in a game. Like that's
right.
The problem.
And that's the thing. So when you look at this thing as it plays out, you know, I had talked to somebody today, and I don't know if this is, you know, I don't know if this is going to be, but this is somebody who has a little bit of influence. It says there was some thought being put to the idea of Hagg checking Malkin. Like basically, and I thought that was interesting because I mean,
I would have Hagg in there instead of Manning. I would have done that,
especially in the Malkin situation. Because Malkin is manhandling. Hagg's the best hitter on the team.
Yeah,
he's got the I mean, good.
And he has more foot speed than Manning too.
Right. So I think the fact they're not, and this is the other fact of why not do that. Why not bring these young players along? Because this series really is nothing but experience for this team, right? This is how you have to look at it. This is a series that if they win, it's unbelievable. But really, the idea here is that they just, you know, this is experience for these teams. So why are we playing? Why are we not playing some younger players and giving them a chance to show what they can do, right?
Well, Kevin, I mean, you covered this series. I don't know if you were there for the first 2 or what, but I was really shocked at Philadelphia coming back the way they did in game 2. And I mean I think that is a statement on their intestinal fortitude. But I don't see how they get back in this series with Elliott basically playing I'd say 60%. And now if Couturier is severely hampered and tries to play, but is going to be less than 100%, I don't know how they win.
Yeah, no, I tend to feel the same way. You know, the problem with the Penguins is the fact that they have so much experience in dealing with postseason success. They've won 34 games now over the last 2 years, plus half of one series, and you gain a lot of knowledge on how to do that. Meanwhile, you have a Philadelphia team that relies heavily on young, inexperienced defense, and I like what Eck just said about this series is all about getting this team, because I think you really have to lose before you learn how to win. And I think they are gaining experience. You can even saw that from the game 1 to game 2 when I thought, the younger players kind of stepped up a little bit more once they had gotten their feet wet a little bit. And then the Penguins said, oh boy, we're in it for a series. And then they turned it up a notch in game 3.
I think Philadelphia is where Toronto was last year against the Caps. I mean, it was a really good experience for the Leafs to be in 5 overtime games in a 6-game series. That's why I think a lot of people in Toronto were disappointed at how outplayed the Leafs were in the first 2 games in Boston, because they weren't even close. And then on Monday they played pretty good and won 4-2. Just to touch on that series, because the games are not, the game 4 is not until Thursday. Leo Komarov was hurt in game 2, didn't play in game 3, and Babcock had said that he was going to be a game time decision on Thursday. Well, he didn't even practice today. So that's one experienced guy that Babcock relies on heavily. That another one that won't be in the lineup. Kadri's serving the last game of his suspension. So, if the Leafs can even up the series, and obviously, now it's a best of 3, but they're going to be in tough against Boston without Komarov and without Kadri for the second game in a row. Matthews and everybody on the team, as they did on Monday, will have to step up big time.
It's kind of a shame.
Do you think, Mike, that the goal that Matthews scored, really kind of gave him the kind of lift that he'll need to kind of get him moving even more in game 4?
Yeah, I think that, he definitely commented that it was, sort of a little bit of a weight off of his shoulders. He didn't want to play it up too much, but, there was a little bit of pressure from fans and media regarding the fact that he hadn't scored, but he was not alone. William Nylander hadn't done anything in the first 2 games. There were very few players who played up to their capabilities in Boston. And, I think Boston's going to come back in game 4, and that Bergeron line was a collective -7 and scored no points in game 3 after scoring 20 points in Boston in the first 2 games. So they're going to have to, that line will come back, and the Leafs are going to have to weather that storm.
Yeah, I think this is the series of the two. If you looked at the best series with the 2 best quantitative teams are playing, it's this series. Like Boston and Toronto are 2 really good teams, and there's no question about it. They shouldn't be a first round matchup. Like we see every year, a couple of those. This is the only one that feels like that really to me. Like this year, like this is
it's like Columbus Pittsburgh was last year, 200-point teams.
Yeah, and Columbus Washington to a degree this year, but to finish up with the Flyers Penguins for a second, I think that what I've seen from the Penguins, though, they're not winning this series necessarily because they're dominating as much as the score might look.
Right.
They're winning the series because of one of the Flyers goaltending, 2 definitely Matt Murray, but who was a big part of game 3. But it does make me a little bit like in the past couple of years, I think I picked the Penguins like every series. Oh, they're just going to beat. I wonder about the Penguins and Columbus. Like I really do. Like I really think about that. Just watching the way this series has gone. The Penguins defense is not good. They're not nearly what they've been the last 2 seasons, in my opinion.
Right.
And you've seen that the Flyers have had chances galore. But the confidence, when you have a goaltender that you don't trust, that keeps your team from playing confidently, and that's affected the Flyers. It wouldn't affect Columbus, if you've got Bobrovsky going like he's going right now. So that would be an interesting series. I think that could really be the end of this Penguins thing to me. Well,
I'll just say for myself, I think if the Penguins are losing, they're going to lose to either Tampa Bay or Boston in the conference final. Columbus will have to prove to me that they can beat the Penguins, and even in the Caps as well, because we know that record. But the way the Penguins are, even with a defense that is not as good as it was in the past, I think that they have Crosby, they have Malkin, they have Kessel. Good luck trying to beat.
They have Matt Murray, really.
And they have Matt Murray too.
That's the big thing that you can't. He's never lost 2 games in a row in the playoffs. Matt Murray. That's just insane. That's just you're not gonna get eliminated if you don't lose. You can't be eliminated if you don't lose 2 games in a row in the playoffs. It's not possible.
Isn't it amazing though how dangerous Columbus looks when they transition up the ice? Like it's kind of like they get the puck, they're turning up, and you go, oh boy, here we go.
Kevin, how big of a raise is Panarin going to get? Because he's a UFA after next year, so they can sign him July 1. I think he's in the $8.5 million a year realm right now.
He's taken another step too. I remember when he came over, like I remember specifically people saying, he's a good player, but like they just like no one thought he was going to be the game breaker that he has been this season in particular, and in the playoffs. Like they saw him as a guy that was a very skilled player, but he was smallish and he just didn't seem to be able to rise up. And boy, that's really changed. And I think he's been empowered too by how he's played in this.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I remember someone calling him the poor man's Patrick Kane. Like the first time I saw him. Oh yeah, he's good, but he's like Patrick Kane. He's not quite as good as Patrick Kane.
The Russian Patrick Kane. Kevin, a couple interesting situations that may have something to do with each other, but may not. There's a window in Bill Peters' contract until Friday, and Glenn Gulletson and his staff get axed in Calgary. There's been some speculation that they may have to do something with another, but there are other coaches out there like Vigneault and Tippett and Daryl Sutter that may be in the mix in Calgary. What have you heard, or what do you think of the situation?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a connection between Tree Living and Tippett because of their Coyotes connection as well, and I've heard a little bit about that as well. That last I heard, Carolina had thought that they were going to keep Peters, and though it hadn't been finalized yet. So, if you're Peters, are you scared away of the fact you don't know who the general manager is going to be? But it's sort of unprecedented. I shouldn't say that because I can't remember, but I don't remember another coach that either had that or exercised that option.
Yeah.
So.
Peter, I was puzzled that Don Waddell comes out and makes a statement saying, well, he's got a couple days left in the window and we've received some inquiries from other teams. I mean, it was very public when I wouldn't think that they would want to make that public,
Here's a working theory. What if Calgary wants him and they're trying to get Carolina to pick up the other 1.6 of his salary? Right? So there's the reason maybe you go a little public and you're trying to sort of create a bit of a, not so much a market, but you're trying to sort of stir the pot a little bit. I read that. I can't remember where I read that, but I did read that yesterday, and it was kind of intriguing to me. Whether it makes sense or not, I'm not sure, but it's an intriguing idea.
Well, the other interesting thing is Edmonton, opposed to everything we thought, Kev, Peter Chiarelli is now staying.
Yes.
And you would think that, and I'll just use this expression, that Todd McClellan might get thrown to the wolves because they have to throw something to the rabid Edmonton fans for a failure of a season. Calgary, like right now they have the vacant coach, and if there's somebody that they want out there, are they going to make their move before Edmonton can maybe get Barry Trotz or Tippett or whoever, because you got that inter province rivalry between those two teams.
Well, and don't forget Alain Vigneault as well. If you're Calgary, isn't that a pretty good fit?
Yep.
He's a pretty high octane. Like, you have a good defensive transition defense there. They move the puck very well out of the back end in Calgary, and that seemed to me that would be perfect for Alain Vigneault's style.
Pretty funny though. I mean, the Vancouver Calgary rivalry with Vigneault was so intense.
Yeah, no, but I think he would be great for Johnny Hockey, and I think that would be a kind of a good fit. I mean, obviously Alain Vigneault is a good coach. He just it worn out his time in the Rangers.
I'm not sure if he's more of a taskmaster or if he's more of a player's coach, but apparently Gulletson was more of a taskmaster, and we usually see when
he was more of a player's coach, actually.
Gulletson?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I talked to our mutual friend in Calgary, and he said he was more of a taskmaster.
I don't know. I think he was perceived as a kind of a player's coach. I might be wrong, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I don't think he's either. Maybe direct. Maybe he's not harsh one way or the other. But I asked because I always ask that because you have this tendency for teams to go from player coach to taskmaster to player coach to taskmaster, like we've always said. That's the way to go, right? So I thought that they were going to go taskmaster because he was a player's coach.
Okay, last thing here. Of the two teams that are considerable favorites that are up 2-1 in their series, which one has more to worry about? Tampa going into Game 4 or Nashville going into Game 4? Kevin?
Wow, that's a great question.
I'll say mine. I'll say mine first.
Yeah.
I think Tampa, simply because Vasilevsky in game 3 was the Vasilevsky of the last month of the regular season, the one that you couldn't depend on, the one that looked like he was tired. And if he's that way, you've got no option there. After it's, what do you go? You're going to go to Louis Domingue? No, they're going to stick with Vasilevsky. Whereas if Rene has a bad game, you can go to Saros. Saros played really well in relief of Rene in game 3 and has proved he's a pretty good backup. I think, if they do like a Scott Darling thing and give him a game off or something like that, they have that option. Whereas Tampa, I think all their chips are on Vasilevsky. And if he doesn't come through, then they're in trouble, because New Jersey's got speed and they have the ignorance of youth. They think they can win, even though I think Tampa is a much better team.
I was thinking about Tampa first, but now the more I think about it, I'm going to go with the Nashville Predators, simply because I don't think they've found their rhythm yet.
Yeah, they haven't.
They're just not where they should be. Like, they're the better team there. They should keep roaring. But in that game 3, in the first 2 games, no matter what was going on, I still felt Nashville was going to take charge of that. I didn't feel that way in game 3. I thought Colorado was sort of having their way and was full of energy. And it just seemed like to me that the Predators have not come close to finding the way they need to play in order to be successful. So for that reason, I'm going to take Nashville as
How about you, Peter, before you have to get out of here?
Sorry, say that again.
On that question?
So what team that's up?
I think Nashville's going to take control of the series tonight.
Do you think Tampa's more in trouble? Possibly.
I think Tampa. I think Nashville can correct their things, and I think Pekka Rinne is going to do exactly what Connor Hellebuck did last night. He's going to lock it down, and I think Tampa's got. They're going to have to contend with some variables with New Jersey, particularly speed and attack, that that can expose a few things on their blue end. And frankly, if you line up those goalies of, say, Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, and Rinne, I think it's Vasilevsky who's had the worst sort of stretch leading into the playoffs that I question a little bit more than the other two. Yeah. And I think so. I think that therefore the answer is Tampa, I think, has the biggest likelihood of maybe not making or getting into trouble.
I think I'm going to go with Nashville as well. It's for a lot of the same reasons Kevin said. The one thing I felt about the Predators in the series, when I saw the Subban hit, I almost felt like he was trying to correct this, because the Predators have a history in the playoffs of playing rivalry teams. Like they play teams that they and I didn't get the sense that they have any real hatred for the Colorado Avalanche. Like, I feel like that they don't, it's not Chicago, it's not St. Louis, it's not Anaheim or San Jose, teams that they've been eliminated by, teams they've been beaten up by before. Colorado hasn't played very well. I mean, Colorado's played very well, and Nashville hasn't, and Nashville still has managed to win 2 games they probably shouldn't have won at home. And then they get beaten in the 3rd game. And I thought, like, Subban was like, listen, we got to create something here. We got to get some kind of juice stirring, because when you watch a series, it doesn't have the normal Nashville thing.
This is the first time the Preds have ever been a favorite in a series.
It's more than that, though, because it goes back to like when they were really favorites and they would still get beaten by Chicago, or when they were favorites and they would get beaten by Detroit. And all these things would happen way back. It's more like, and I don't know that Winnipeg is more, at least Winnipeg is, perhaps, I guess, a bigger rival, but it's not like, it's definitely different in Nashville, I think, when they play against certain teams. Does that make any sense, Kev?
It does indeed. I'm with you on that, actually.
So I think that, and I think Subban's trying to create that. But anyway, it'll be fun. Enjoy the games tonight, guys. Thank you so much, Kevin, as always. And we will talk to you all tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. See you then.